girls were 5. Their mother suddenly died of what was called a brief illness. I can't tell you exactly what that was. Now, at this point, the father had a very busy career. He worked long hours, and he made up for it by, basically through money, I guess is what you would say. He would give them anything and everything that they wanted, basically spoiling them. They could use his charge card to buy whatever they wanted, which included thousands of dollars worth of clothing and accessories. He let them drive his Cadillac. Now, since the girls had no mother, I guess they turned to each other for all their emotional needs, and it became a very, very close, probably too close, more like codependent or whatever comes after codependent, because codependent isn't a strong enough word for this. They were inseparable. They had a lot of friends, but yet no one could really get too close to them. They were considered loners, but not really, if you know what I mean. They liked to spend time with each other most of all, but they were also out and about doing things in the same way other kids were. In high school, they joined the cheerleading squad. They also joined the junior ROTC. They dreamed of both becoming neurosurgeons in the future, and they did have pretty decent grades. But their friends from high school would say about them that they were very into partying, drinking, smoking cigarettes, and marijuana. And they would extend their partying into the week, so it wasn't just a weekend thing. And they were often seen arguing in public. Many people could just remember them screaming out each other's names at the top of their lungs. Now, at some point, the family picked up and moved to Florida, and that is where they attended college. In 2008, they opened up their own yoga studio, and it was very, very successful. So a couple years later, they opened a second one. So the first one was in Palm Beach, and the second one was in West Palm Beach. They were living in a luxury high-rise building, and they drove matching Porsches. Their clients at the time spoke very highly of them. They were very respected, this was when they got a pretty bad reputation back in Florida and became known as the Terrible Twins. Now, I did mention that when they were in high school, they were heavy into partying and drinking. Well, that didn't go away, at least not the drinking part. So, they clearly had developed quite a bit of an alcohol problem. And while in Utah, they had several incidents with the police involving alcohol. One particular time, their car had crashed and fallen into a ditch, and the police came to the scene. The two were drunk, they were arguing, they were pulling each other's hair and just being completely unruly. These are some of the charges I will just read to you that they acquired while in Utah. So this was in 2014. Allison had suspicion of driving under the influence, fleeing the scene of an accident, driving without insurance, disorderly conduct, and interfering with an arrest. And Anne had public intoxication, assault on a police officer, disorderly conduct, and interfering with an arrest. So now, for me, when I hear that their vehicle crashed and fell into a ditch in Utah back in 2014, it really makes me stop and think about the foreshadowing that is going on here. Okay, let's move on. So, they decided to up and move to Maui now. Why Maui? Well, they felt that it would be a very spiritual place, and they were very spiritual. Now, this is when they changed their names. So, Allison became Alexandria, and Anne became Anastasia, and their last name changed to Duval. Why did they change their names? Were they running? Were they hiding from debt or bad reputations? Hard to know exactly. While in Maui, of course, there was another run-in with the law. At least one, probably more, but specifically on Christmas Eve in 2015, they were arrested for disorderly conduct and terroristic threatening. Moving up to the date of the incident. It was May of 2016. And at the time, the women were living with their respective boyfriends in an apartment, and Anastasia and her boyfriend decided to go on a camping trip. But what happened was, unexpectedly, Alexandria showed up at the camping trip. She had taken her boyfriend's Ford SUV to the campsite, and an argument broke out because it wasn't planned for her to show up, and Anastasia and her boyfriend wanted to be alone. They went out for a little bit alone together. They came back with alcohol, and the boyfriend was kind of upset about it because he knew that the two of them were, as he said, like Jekyll and Hyde with the alcohol. And he just didn't want to see them drinking. she smelled like alcohol, but I don't know why I couldn't find a single report or mention of a blood alcohol test on her or her sister, when it seems like that might have been the first thing that would have been tested. But I don't know if anyone can find that information. Let me know, because it seems important, very important. Shortly after the crash, Alexandria was arrested, but she was not held because they just didn't have enough to hold her on. So she headed back over to Utica, where they had the funeral and where she stayed for the next few months. And guess what? She was arrested again in Utica for drunk driving, and she was released on bail. Meanwhile, while she was out on bail, the grand jury back in Maui indicted her and extradited her back to Hawaii for the murder trial of her sister. Alexandria decided, with the help of her lawyer, that she would forego a jury trial and instead just have a trial in front of the judge. Now, here are some of the things that were presented at trial. Keith Weiss, who was a chef and ex-boyfriend of Anastasia, said the following. He had dated her for 6 months, and he said, quote, "I once got a call from Anastasia saying, 'Get over here now, I'm going to kill her.' She actually started hitting Alexandria with the phone. I heard it thump, thump, thump. They were both screaming at each other. I get to their apartment and there's broken glass everywhere from wine bottles and shattered glasses. There was blood everywhere and the bedroom door was falling off its hinges. Both of them were sitting on the couch when I walked in and they were like, 'Hey, how are you doing?' Allison had a bruise on her face. I asked them if they were okay and they were like, 'We're good, we're fine, we're just watching a movie.' Meanwhile, all around them, it's total destruction. They seemed to not know they wanted to kill each other just minutes earlier." He also explained that on he reported some very odd things. After Alexandria came home from the crash, she was behaving very, very unusually. He said, quote, "She began cuddling up on me. It seemed like she was flirting with me. She sat down beside me really close and lay her head on my shoulder. She put on Anastasia's clothes. I started talking to her about what happened. She avoided answering any of my questions. When I saw her in Anastasia's dress, it was disturbing. Anastasia had just worn that dress a few nights earlier." So that is, like he said, extremely disturbing. Why was she doing that? But there's more. There were quite a few witnesses to the actual crash. There were people who had been driving behind them or headed towards them who saw what was going on in their car and heard them screaming and fighting. So, for example, one witness said, quote, "The girl that was on the passenger side, she was yelling and yelling and yelling. That's when the girl who was driving the car said, 'Call the psychiatrist. I need a psychiatrist.'" Other witnesses said they saw the two pulling hair and having a fist fight right before it went off the side of the highway. Quote, "Hair pulling and punching is what I saw. The SUV sped up and then it jerked to the left." So, people were saying that they were seen arguing, they were heard yelling, they were pulling hair, and Anastasia may have pulled Alexandria's hair from the right side, because Alexandria was driving, right before they swerved off the road. So, the way I understand it, they were arguing and arguing and arguing. At one point they pulled over briefly and were stopped on the side. Then they took off. Anastasia pulled Alexandria's hair. She swerved to the left and went over. She did not brake at any point. That was found from the information inside the car's computer. They could see that she had not braked at all as she was plunging over the side. At the scene of the crash, it was found that Anastasia had a few strands of Alexandria's hair in her hand, which confirms that most likely she had pulled her sister's hair prior to the crash. The defense attorney was trying to say that it was an accident. They were arguing. Anastasia pulled her hair. It caused her to, swerve off the road, and it was just a big, horrible accident. She didn't do it on purpose. She didn't have a death wish. She wasn't trying to kill her sister or herself. And she did not plan it. She did not know there was one open area where she could go over the cliff without a wall. Just an unfortunate accident. The police who responded to the scene did not feel it was an accident. They felt it was deliberate. They couldn't say why she might have done it or what was the motivation, but they felt that from the evidence, it was done deliberately. Whether whether she had planned it in advance. They don't know whether it was a momentary, I'm just gonna drive us off the cliff right now kind of thing. They don't know. But they said it was deliberate based on the swerve patterns on the ground, you know, the patterns on the dirt, and just everything that they saw screamed out deliberate. The judge found her innocent and acquitted her. And that was that. She went on the Dr. Phil show after this. And of course, as with many Dr. Phil shows, it did not provide us with really anything of value. She came on, she sat there. They went through pretty much everything I'm telling you about, from beginning to end. You know, her past, all the way back, up to the crime. Everything she said was, I don't know, I don't think that happened, I don't remember that, no, that couldn't have happened. And Dr. Phil was like, well, it's in a police report. She's like, well, it didn't happen, I don't think so, And he was nice as could be. And after all of that, listening to her deny everything, here's what Dr. Phil said. He thinks she just doesn't want to say anything bad about her sister, but that it is probably Anastasia's fault. He didn't say fault, but the reason they plunged over the cliff is because she pulled Alexandria's hair. That's why she lost control of the vehicle. He said, I think you were both probably drinking. And then he said, is it right to be drinking and driving? No. Is it right to be arguing and fighting while you drive? No. But you're both human. That's what he said. Okay. Really? I'll try that defense if I ever get a DWI. Knock on wood, I never would. I'm just saying. You're both human. That's what he said, okay? So I was a little bit astounded by that. Anyway, what do you think? I don't really know what to think. I mean, I will say I pretty much am sure that it wasn't planned, it wasn't premeditated. I kind of do believe that it was a momentary, oh, let me just drive this car right over the cliff, like, not really thinking it through. Just kind of similar to maybe whatever happened the time when they crashed and fell into a ditch, and then they got out and they were yelling at each other and pulling hair, and I bet it's almost like, I'm thinking it's a similar situation that just ended differently. Am I making sense? That's just, if I had to guess, that's what I would say. I would say that Alexandria was very angry in the moment. They both were. They were both fighting and, you know, pulling hair and screaming, and they both probably had been drinking. Why, we don't know exactly. I can't understand, but... And she probably just said, yeah, I'll show her. Let me just, you know, careen right off this road. But just not really thinking that they were going to die. He's just really not thinking about the consequences. That's what I think. Should she have been acquitted? Well, I don't think they have enough evidence to really be able to charge her as anything more than it being an accident, because they don't have the alcohol report. I mean, she was driving recklessly. She endangered the lives of herself and her passenger and the other people on the road. How is that not a crime? Even if she didn't plan to kill anyone, wouldn't it be second degree murder or manslaughter or some category? I don't know. I just don't know. So, that's about all I got, but I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on the case. Do you think it was an accident? Do you think that it was murder? What do you think?